say, Grant, thank you so much for being here today. We're super excited to have you. I would love if you could introduce yourself.
Well, first of all, I definitely appreciate you having me here today. I mean, I think it's definitely a solid and great opportunity. A little bit more about myself is like it's kind of difficult, right? I mean, I always explain myself as half creative, half analytical. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, as a graffiti artist. I would say my parents dragged me kicking and screaming into Atlanta, Georgia, and then they threw me in art school. So my first degree was graphic design. Shortly thereafter that, when I realized that I had both hemispheres of the brain, I was like, well, like graphic design is great, but I need more. I need more technical. So then I went and got my web design and multimedia degree. And then I got pretty much overzealous and completely consumed growing a business and growing that opportunity. And so I was literally hopping in and out of multiple different corporations, learning their systems. And I was trying to grow my own enterprise at the same time. And I was, working 30 days here, 60 days there, got my insurance license, got my Series 6. I had my graphic design degree. I was running an agency. I was doing all these different things. And then unfortunately in 2018, I had a stroke. And my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife right now, came to me and she was like, well, you've been branding people generally for the past 18 years. Why don't you not take this opportunity for the next year to recover and come back and brand yourself the way you would have brand your clients? So first of all, after that, I married her because it only made logical sense because it was an eye opener for me since I almost died. I took about 18 months to make a full recovery. And at the end of those 18 months, I was like, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to step out from behind the curtains? Am I going to become a YouTuber or a podcaster? Because I was more shy, I picked the latter and I became a podcaster, turned into a YouTuber now. But ideally, in that time and moment, I had the opportunity to become a podcaster and I started writing books as well. So from then until now, I've authored at least 8 books. I'm working on book 9 right now. And I had the opportunity to also author 32 notebooks as well within 30 days. So that's kind of like the summary of who I am and where I am today.
That's so amazing. What an amazing journey. I would love if you could tell us what your books are about.
Yeah, so like my first generation of books, like coming out of that stroke, was just more so like general business. It was just talking about like keys to success. Because again, I've had many successes as an entrepreneur, but learning how to then document and strategize and leave a legacy of breadcrumbs for the next generation is after the stroke. So my first generation of books are just step by step. Hey, this is how you do something. But now I'm more so like, how do you document something? So like one of my books is a journal and it's a book journal, and what that journal allows a user to do is essentially document the key information from that book times 90 of them. So imagine walking around with one journal that has 90 of the greatest information that you can have in the palm of your hand versus having 90 books in a book bag, trying to drag that across the street with you.
I love that. That's so amazing. What inspired you to write your books?
First series of books was just kind of like, well, I heard about this author thing, growing up in high school, I never was really a reader, which is like ironic that I'm an author right now. And I was like, let me just write something. And what do I know about? Well, I know about strategy. I know about business. I know about these things. And I was just trying to figure out the authorship side of things. And so that was like the first generation. But now I would say more so the fuel is I want someone to look at these books as not only a book, but more so a guide. I'd write more in user guides to help someone transition from where they are to.
Amazing. I love that. When you were writing your books, who were you thinking of when it comes to who your books are for?
So I would say, and again, I always think about the past versus the present and in the future. I would say right now, my books are articulated to small business owners, founders, an individual that's in corporate America looking to step out on their own and becoming a full-time entrepreneur. And, part of what I'm doing strategy wise now going into the next year is I'm creating children's books as well in the same philosophy. So again, the next generation is the one that's going to lead forward or their kids or their grandkids. So I need to have a cross reference between the adults and the kids all underneath that one brand.
Amazing. And you touched on part of this next question, but how long have you been writing and what made you really start?
Yeah, so writing, I would say I started writing roughly around 2018 is when I published my first book. So we were roughly around 5 years or so. And what started me writing was just like understanding marketing. Like every time I see someone that's a motivational speaker or someone that has a successful business or they're getting leads, 9 out of 10 times the source of that bubble is coming from having a book. That book then gives you opportunity to talk on stage, gives you opportunity to then sit down and market. Imagine going into a business and I'm giving them a book versus a business card. Well, the book has way more clout than a business card does. So that was the original reason. And then transitioning into where I am now, it's 100% about breadcrumbs. I want the opportunity. If I could time travel 100 years in the future, I would love to see my great grandkids utilizing the content that I'm creating and developing now to help them be successful down the road.
I love that. That's amazing. What is your schedule like when you are writing a book?
It's systematic. So literally everything I do is based upon systems, and that's something that I learned post stroke. Before stroke, we just kind of like work 18-hour, 20-hour days and just get things done. But now I systematically do it. Like prime example, when I wrote these notebooks, it was a system. I was like, okay, what's my brand colors? Okay, what are users looking for? Are they looking for dot journals? Are they looking for grids? Are they looking for lines? So that became the variable, right? And then like the distinction between that, that's how I ended up with 32 books. But ideally, the system behind it allows me to kind of step in. Okay, I got the first 4 books done. Those first 4 books were maybe just the first color, or maybe it was just all the grids, or maybe it was just all the lines. And then I'm going through a checklist to make sure that I'm hitting every single thing to get the quantity at scale that I want at a period of time.
That's amazing. What do you need in your writing space to help you stay focused?
That's an interesting question. I mean, with writing, it comes in waves, right? I mean, I think anyone that writes enough, for me, my writing moment is 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Like I would wake up. And the first thing I would do is literally go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, do all these different things. And then I would like grab my phone and just sit down in my notes and just start filling out content. I may have a concept and then I may record audio and transcribe it really quickly. I just want to get that content out of me as fast as possible. And I know if I wait until I take a shower, eat breakfast, help the kids go to school, some of that data would get lost in transition. So I have to document it right then and there. And 3, 4 o'clock in the morning is the best time because nobody else is awake.
Do you need complete silence or do you have music going in the background?
Um, I used to like music in the background, but now like I think about the variables of like, okay, should I use this word or is this going to be a more SEO compliant word? Because again, I may take a section or a chapter and turn it into a blog post or an article. So I'm thinking about multiple different things. Like I said earlier, I'm half creative and half analytical. So my creative mind is running, and then my analytical mind is like my music. It'll say, "Hey, guy, don't forget this. Well, use this paraphrase. Use this. Do some research on that word to make sure that word is being searched. If you're going to create a title for something, am I adding how? Am I adding why? Am I adding like the premises of a question in that title for somebody to find it? Because again, you could write anything you want, but if you're not thinking about how is a user going to integrate or find it, then essentially you're doing yourself a disservice.
That's amazing. Super unique. What is your favorite writing snack or drink?
Hmm. In the evening, I would say my favorite drink would definitely be bourbon or whiskey. And snack wise, it's variable. I mean, I got a little bit of a sweet tooth, so I mean, Kit Kats are definitely my friends and my enemy at the same time. But ideally, I mean, like literally, I'll wake up and I'll drink some coffee and just go.
Love that. What type of books do you personally enjoy reading?
I practice what I preach. So like literally, I'm more of an audiobook listener. And I talk about the strategies of how to listen to an audiobook. So I listen to audiobooks at 1x, 1.5x, or 2x, because it allows me to consume that content so much faster. But ideally, I'm listening to nonfiction. I'm listening to information. I'm listening to strategies. I'm listening to, you know, like books is one of those things that's been around forever, and there's systems in books that would never change, but it's always like a new little something, a new little like AI, like the dawn of the new AI copy. Like that's something that I'm really engulfed in and I'm utilizing because again, it can compress time, it can make you write faster, and again, you could get ideas. You're not using it for books, but essentially you're using it to get your prompts to then build out the content that you want to deliver.
I love that. That's super unique. We've never had, I don't think, anyone talk about audiobooks. Would you be willing to talk a little bit more about how you got into audiobooks?
Time management. like going back to what I said earlier, I burnt myself out. So think about it from this standpoint. Like if I'm working on something and it's mundane, right? Let's say it's something that I don't really have to process and think that deeply. Well, again, I could do a duality in that time frame. So why would I not listen to something while my brain is not really being fully used? And I may not be able to absorb 100% of it, but as I'm listening, I'm like, oh, chapter 3, 5 minutes, and I'm looking at the time code, and that's what my journal does. My journal allows me to kind of like look at it, and then I can write down that time code, write down that book, write down that information, so I can go back and research that content later, and I know exactly where to go to listen to the audio because I'm writing it down. So for me, it's more managing my time. And if I'm walking, if I'm working out, if I'm washing dishes, it's kind of difficult to hold a book in your hand when you're doing these things. So having that audio playing again, I'm doing something mundane like washing dishes. I'm not really processing. I'm walking. I'm not really processing. I may take a shower. I'm not really processing. So playing audiobooks in all these different time frames, I always say that you could easily listen to a book per day, a book per week, getting to 52 books per year, which is the average for most entrepreneurs or most executives. It's pretty easy when you break it down to 15 minutes here, 30 minutes there every single day.
I love that. Many people don't even consider audiobooks, but it really is a form of reading. Are there any books or authors that inspire you to become a writer?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to, Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins, just seeing the way I always say, if you go to Tony Robbins, it's like going to church for entrepreneurs. But just understanding the psychology behind what he's doing and how he's doing it, I think his books are phenomenal. There's also Robert Kiyosaki, which is, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is legendary. There's also so many different like original writers of nonfiction that when you look back at what they've done 20, 30, 40, and even like up to like almost 100 years ago, right? If you're talking about certain writers, they're still valid data today. So like looking at how they've done that, how did they write that content evergreen to make it last the test of time? I think for any nonfiction writer, those are things that you have to study and analyze because again, you don't want to document current events per se, but you want to be able to solve problems that are legacy problems that may happen now that may happen 100 years from now.
Amazing. What type of books did you grow up reading? Did you have an all-time favorite?
I hated reading. Believe it or not, I hated reading. But the books that I do remember, um, that I always remember that I hated before, but I love now. And for the same reason I hate it, the same reason why I love it now. And it was Lord of the Flies. And I remember it very distinctly because Lord of the Flies, reading it, it was like 2 chapters talking about the foliage, talking about the trees, talking about the island. I'm like, can we get to the story? 2020 being hindsight, looking at the artistic creativity of being able to write about the foliage, write about the wind blowing through the leaves, and depicting a visual without visuals, that's a hell of a craft and a skill to have. But it took me forever to realize that looking back 2020 being hindsight.
Love that. On the other side of that, now as an adult, what are your favorite series or authors that if they come out with something, you're going to automatically grab it?
I'm trying to remember his name, Russell Bronson, and he is the guy for like Traffic Secrets. He's also the founder of ClickFunnels. Anything that he potentially drops, I would definitely read it because again, his is not only real world, it's not only legendary, but it's also now. It kind of tells you how to convert, how to sell, how to market in today's world. And it may not be timeless per se, but in this 20, 30-year span, it's very activating to read his content and then take action on it.
Amazing. What would you tell someone just starting out with reading again?
I think, like to your point that you said earlier about reading is not necessarily just holding a book in your hand. I mean, there's so many different other variables of reading, right? There's visual reading to where obviously a screen is transcribing and you're seeing copy scrolling, and YouTube is phenomenal for that. TikTok is phenomenal for that. There's audio, right? There's also physical books, but there's also shorthanded books as well too. I mean, you can consume so much content from a shorthanded book that's going to make you actually read more because after you read the shorthand, you're like, I love this information. What does the original look like? And so you go from reading the summary to then going to purchase the real book, and then you end up reading double, right? You end up reading more because you're getting engaged from the short content, giving you the quick bullet points to where essentially is marketing and selling to you. Like, why am I reading this short version? I need to get the big version. So I would say just looking at multiple different strategies and understanding that you don't have to be completely traditional and just hold a book in your hand. Like my wife, she reads 3 books at a time, and she reads all the time, all before bed, after when she wakes up in the morning, she's always reading. Versus myself, I'm an audio guy, and again, I think both of us probably read dozens of books per month, hundreds of books per year, but we read it differently.
Love that. On the other side of that, what would you tell someone just starting to write their own book?
I think it really comes down to the creativity, right? And creativity is something that if you don't own or if you don't have it in your body, you can buy the creativity, right? But it's more so figuring out like the problem that you're going to solve. Like my first book versus the books that I'm producing now and going to produce, there's a difference, right? The first books were more kind of like general information. Now I'm really like more so niching down. Like this book, I'm planning on developing a book about podcasting, right? Like my next journal is going to be a podcast journal, and then I'm going to do a podcasting book. So it becomes like this global series of just about podcasting. So again, I'm niching it down, but I'm delivering multiple different aspects of value. So you need to figure out the problem of your user, right? Whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Once you figure out those problems, then you make a list of those problems. And then I would say you don't create a like a book with all the answers. You create a book per answer. So that's how you get to Siri level, right? If I have 5 different questions that are major problems for the users, I would write an outline for each one of those answers. So it may be, hey, how to market. Well, you could market through email. You could market through billboard. You can market through social media. Well, that's 3 separate books. Why would I short myself by condensing those books into one? I may write an overview book and then have the separate books, and that's how you get to scale. So you want to think about not only your passion, but where do you want to go and how do you scale your business behind the books?
Amazing. I love that. Circling back to your notebooks, journals, and books, are they all compatible to or companions to each other? Like if you like in a series type situation?
Correct. So the
Okay.
and it's funny that you asked it because I've had that question before. But what's the difference between a notebook and a journal? And by layman's definition, they both have similarities and they could both be in the same category. But in my case, like my notebooks are essentially 100% driven by the user, and they're not standard notebooks. They're not just plain pages. Like they're guide. I consider them guided notebooks. There's an index in the front now, and the thing that I hate about notebooks in today's world is that I have dozens of notebooks. Before I created my own, I would write something in it, and then I end up with 5 notebooks. And then I'm like, damn, where is that information? Maybe it's in book 1, maybe it's in book 3. And then once I get the book, what page is it on? So most of the notebooks don't have numbered pages, which is a disservice. Most of the notebooks don't have like a cataloging system, which is another disservice. So like my notebooks essentially have an opportunity for you to write down your index and say, okay, I'm writing about real estate today, and real estate is on page 15, right? So that every single time I see that keyword of real estate in my book, all the pages that have that tab is associated to real estate, so I could find them pretty quickly. Then the journal takes it to a whole nother level. The journal takes that notebook function and then it adds on more detailing based upon a specialty. So in this case, podcasting. What's the name of the podcast? Who's the host? Are they doing any links? How long the episodes run? How did you find it? Do you want to recommend it? What was the topic? What was the episode? Like all the general information, you could write them individually in a notebook, but the journals are more guided and they have the templates built into them. So you have your own and then you have the specialty version. So it allows me to scale the journals to many other topics versus just having the notebooks for general information.
Amazing. It's very unique and I love it. What's one thing that people are generally surprised to find out about you?
Um, that I was a wild child, that I absolutely hated information. I hated knowledge. I hated education. I literally despised it. I mean, my senior year in high school, I missed about 65% of the year. The only reason why I even graduated from high school was the administration gave me an opportunity to take my final exams. And if I would pass my final exams with a A or higher, like literally had to be nothing less than an A, not even A minus or higher on all my final exams, then they would just make me graduate because they didn't want me in the school no more. So literally, that's what I did. I studied night and day for like a week and passed all my exams with A's, and that's how I graduated from high school, even though that I missed 65% of the year.
That's amazing. Is there anything you would like to say or add?
I would just say, I mean, books are definitely like a they could be a passion project, but in addition to making them a passion project, obviously books are a big business. I mean, when you look at the industry and the world that we live in, the Bible is probably the most documented and the most sold book of all time, right? And obviously, it has a price tag associated to it, and obviously, people are very passionate about that book as well. You can write a book that could not necessarily outweigh or become the Bible, but in your target audience and your demographic, that book could become the Bible of that topic, right? It could become the go-to, much like we talked about Tony Robbins. Some people are dedicated to what his book says, and his books are golden. Rich Dad Poor Dad, for some people, that's the book of real estate. That's the golden book. There's no reason why you cannot write that book. The only thing you have to do is just step forward, take the opportunity, remove the fear, remove the hesitation, forget about what people think, and just start documenting, writing, and executing your book.
Amazing. Where's the best place for readers to find your book? I know some readers love signed copies. Is that an option and the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, so the best place to connect with me obviously will be sagrant.com. And then obviously there's bossoncage.com, and that's kind of like the two hemispheres, right? You could easily search on Amazon for a Boston Cage. With SA Grant, you probably get Ulysses S. Grant and everything else. But Boston Cage, I've branded it and marketed to where you could type that in Google, you could type that in Amazon, and 9 out of 10 things that you're going to see are going to be 100% me or my business or my books related. So if you're looking for the books, Amazon's a great place to step into that. If you look directly for me and my other services, sagrant.com.
Amazing. Do you offer signed copies?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. If somebody reaches out to me, and again, like I have forums everywhere. If you want to reach out to me directly, email address would be info@bossoncage.com. And if somebody reaches out to me, then by all means, I could definitely send them a signed copy, or send them a link to get a signed copy directly from me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We're so grateful that we got to interview you and learn so much from you. We will be sure to drop those links in the show notes. That way everyone can find you. And again, thank you so much.
Again, the pleasure was mine, and again, I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity. And for the listeners, definitely listen. Give her some reviews. If you're not doing it, then obviously you need to do it because this podcast should be heard.